What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the TDR Show. Me and Jay are back, and we're talking a little Dynasty today. Last week, we talked a little Debbie. Today, we're talking Dynasty. We're going over some Dynasty Panic Meter. So what are some guys out there? Should we be worried about these guys? So we're going over 9 assets in your Dynasty League today. Just talking about, hey, are we buying, selling, holding? Where's our panic meter for this? Like, hey, should you sit tight? We're not really concerned with this guy. Well, now we're we need to reevaluate based on some things that are going on. And then are there some legit concerns out there? Are some guys that, hey, we're going to say, hey, you should sell right now. Here are those prices here. So we're going to give you a full kind of spectrum here of guys that either we aren't worried about or we are. Kind of talk about their dynasty prices, go into this summer trying to build that dynasty team up ready for August. And hey, are there some guys that we're going to be a little bit concerned about? So stick around here. As the intro is going, we will be diving into our I don't know how to say it, scaredy cat. I just watched that movie with my kids. Dynasty assets out there that you're a little bit worried about as we head into, June and July. All right, Jay, we're starting off hot today. We're going straight into the players, just talking about these guys and where we're at. First up is Jordan Love, quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. Jay was making fun of his wide receiver room pre-show, so I'm interested to hear his take here. 6'4", 219. Last season, what we saw from him, 268 out of 425 for completions attempts, 3,000 passing yards, just a little bit above that, 25 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Got banged up too at the beginning of the year, played 15 games, but definitely was not fully healthy last year. Just for context, right? Just considering what he is as an asset. When you're looking at what he did in PFF offensive grade 75.8, passing grade 74.3, turnover worthy play percentage 3.2%. Where did he finish from a fantasy perspective? QB 16, about 17.2 fantasy points per game last year. So not terrible. Not great, right? When the expectations were possible QB 12, QB 10 in that range here. So, Jay, are you worried about Jordan Love? He's sitting there at QB 12 overall and keep trade cut in terms of dynasty value. How are you feeling about him?
I'm a little worried. He sat a couple years. He had his first year playing. He had a really good year. Last year was a little bit of step down, and you said playing through injuries. You talk about the wide receiver room. We got so many wide receivers there with lots of potential, including drafting a first-round wide receivers for the first time in some time there, or maybe ever, in Matthew Golden, which we're excited about. But is he an alpha true type 1 wide receiver? I'm not sure. But we got Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, who's working his way back from injury, Savion Williams. It's a whole bunch of a supporting cast that are kind of maybes. Nobody's really taken off there from that perspective. And what I'd say is, with the way I look at dynasty football, fantasy football, is points per game, age, and cost. And right now, ESPN, has him projected around 15 points per game, 15.4 points per game. And if you look at the expected points per game last year was around 15.3 throughout his entire 2024 season. Now, it sounds like he outperformed that from, what we talked about, but does that somewhat revert, and is it a 15.4 points per game player? That's really, if he ends up being in that range, that's a back end QB2 type range, right?
Yeah.
And what you have to pay right now for him, if you're drafting him, if you're looking at AEP or wherever you're going to KTC, you're paying QB 12 type prices. So, back end QB 1 type prices for back end QB 2 type points per game. That's the kind of stuff that makes me a little nervous when I'm drafting players like this. Now, he's still young. There's still room for develop. There is talent. They're adding talent to the pass catchers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something that makes me a little nervous, especially if he does really come in that 15.4 fantasy points per game. Now, if you're you're looking in the range, points per game range of the players that are in that range, that's Tua, that's Justin Fields, that's Jared Goff. Those guys you can get rounds and rounds later that you can pay less and less price for in those ranges. And yet you might have a little bit more certainty with Jordan Love because he did have that one great season. And, you might get the ship righted and get back to it. But that's a price that I'm willing to pay. I'm a little panicked at paying QB1 type prices for Jordan Love at this moment. I'd rather pass on him, trade him out, and draft somebody later that might, might get you more points even than he does with a slightly bit more certainty from that perspective. So I'm panicked a little bit. I don't know if I'm like full on pounding the table panic, but when I look at my work in the Dynasty Investor series, like this screams like a sell type of opportunity for me.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with his wide receivers. I think the question is like, can they elevate themselves, right? So when we think of what Jordan Love can be, is all right. Where's he getting drafted at? And I think it's interesting that you mentioned about Tua because we'll talk about Tua here in a second. Spoiler alert: I'm sure everybody knew we were going to be talking about Tua at some point. But to your point, so right now, just checking out Dynasty Data Labs ADP, startup ADP. Love is going QB 12, and then Tua's QB 24. So he's going full 12 QBs after that. So, I mean, there's going to be question marks with Tua. We'll get into those. But to your point, when you're thinking about like him as a fantasy asset, like there is like that kind of, that tier of quarterbacks. I mean, when you're looking at where Jordan Love is, and then you go through kind of the other tier there, I mean, here's kind of where those guys are getting mocked. Brock Purdy's. So actually, this is a good exercise, I think. Jay, who would you rather have, Love or Brock Purdy?
Oh, on the spot here, like the value lines up for. Hold on, let me check real quick.
Okay. Just answer the question, Jay. You don't have to look at your spreadsheets. Like who do you feel more comfortable with probably drafting as your QB1? Jordan Love or Brock Purdy?
Probably Jordan Love. I'm just not that big of a Brock Purdy fan.
Well, then JJ sitting there. JJ McCarthy is sitting there, and then you got.
I'd rather have JJ at a much later round than taking Jordan Love.
Okay,
for sure.
So that just goes. I mean, that shows you it's hard because when you're looking at that tier, you got JJ sitting there, Kyler, Cam, Trevor Lawrence, Baker, Michael Penix, Bryce Young, Jared, Dak, all the way down to Tua. Justin Fields, like you said, is in there. Jackson Dart's in there as well. So I think it really just comes down to that team build and what it looks like. Because I would be here's the other thing. I would be okay with having Jordan Love as my QB2 if I get one of the top guys. But then you're going to be missing on like the running back, wide receivers in that range. So when you're thinking of ADP and where it's going, as we're kind of going through it, it's like, okay, well, are you comfortable missing on maybe when you're looking at some of the guys going around Jordan Love, JSN, Garrett Wilson, Amari Hampton, Devonta Chain, Ted McMillan, Sam Laporta, possible tight end, AJ Brown, like depending on that build, right? Let's say you do that. But the way I look at it is I don't mind him being your QB2. If you're just in a dynasty league and it wasn't a startup this year, if he's your QB2, that's pretty good. If you have a top 8 asset. But if I'm looking at a startup this year and I see Jordan Love sitting there, he's not my QB1 I would go after because, like you said, I'd rather go after JJ, who's going 6 quarterbacks later. If I'm going to build a team that way, I'm comfortable doing that as well. So that's just my my startup take, my dynasty take in terms of what Jordan Love looks like. As far as like him as an asset, yeah, I'm worried too because I think if you bought him previous this year, you bought at QB10 prices. I mean, he had a good stretch of the season in 2023, like when you looked at what he did, and he kind of he tore up the Cowboys in the playoffs. So everybody kind of vaulted him up a little bit. Last year, I think the MCL was a bigger deal than most, though. Like, I do think that MCL, I don't think it was completely healed there. I do think that he's in a great offense. I love what he is in terms of just like a QB2. You have him there. Like, I do like the situation around him, but he did regress a little bit last year. And I mean, you could talk about maybe defense has caught up to him. There's a lot of things in there. I think as an asset, if I can tier down, I do that, right? So I always want to try to be actionable here. So if I can get Jordan Love, I don't mind tearing down to Brock Purdy. Here's the guys I don't mind tearing down to for Jordan Love. Brock, JJ, Kyler. I don't even mind tearing down to Cam Ward, in my opinion, based on draft capital and based on maybe what he could be. Trevor Lawrence, 100%. Like, I don't understand why Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence are 5 quarterbacks away, right, in terms of where they're at in startup prices right now. Baker might be the one area where you're like, no, I'd rather lead on Jordan Love in terms of that youth, right? 26 years old as a 30. But I would not mind tearing down if I'm a contender to Jared Goff, Dak, or hell, Tua or Justin Fields, maybe, possibly. I mean, I know that Justin can be a little nerve-wracking because of the, I don't know if he's going to be a starter after this year. So if you don't want to go that route, that's fine. But I don't mind Tua. I don't mind taking a risk on Dak, Jared Goff in that range if I need kind of the guy that's going to maybe finish maybe higher in fantasy points per game. But definitely guys I'm tearing down to for sure. JJ, Kyler, Cam, Trevor in that range, 100%. I'm okay tearing down into there if I can.
Yeah, I agree. That's the actionable advice that I would say as well. Is like, you have to pick these guys in terms of value, but once if you have them and you can tier down and get the extra, that makes so much sense because you can get guys that maybe are scoring more points for you and maybe similar age and then collect some extra on top of that for Jordan Love. So yeah, I love the comments you made about Trevor Lawrence, JJ McCarthy. Those really stick. Those are guys that youthful-ish guys that I'd be interested in tearing down for Jordan Love.
Yeah, and there's some deals out here. So just to give you guys context, I mean, there was a deal going on Fantasy Calc database. Jordan Love straight up for Bo Nix, and technically that's a tier up because Bo Nix is QB8 right now on Keep Trade Cut, by the way.
Is he really?
Which is pretty high. Like, so that's probably a little high for me in that range. But just to show you, or another deal, like just to kind of give you guys context here, you can move Jaden Reed and Jordan Love for a 27 first and Trevor Lawrence. I do that all day. Like that deal happened in a league. So if I can get Trevor Lawrence on a first, that first is indefinitely more valuable than Jaden Reed will ever be. And if you're going to tear down to Trevor Lawrence, I'll take the first. I don't think the tear down needs a first, but if you get a first, that's cash money there in terms of what you're looking at in terms of like that value. And then another interesting, so it's interesting how all the deals go. But again, Jordan Love in a fourth for Tua and a first. At least if the embedded risk was with Tua, you still get that first back. I'm totally okay with that. The one I think is interesting is Dak in a second for Jordan Love. So it's a 26 second. That, to me, you need a first. If I'm tearing all the way down to Dak based on where he's at, his age and everything there, I do think you still need a first back. But those are some ideas. Like you can go tier down and still get a 27 first, which is going to be more valuable. So that's kind of how I look at Love.
Man, I might be writing some articles on Bo Nix here too.
You might be. Well. You didn't see that. Huh?
Yeah, but Jordan Love, that whole argument makes a lot of sense for me. I love the tear down. I love the collect extra, and you mentioned some great people there to kind of tear down too.
Yeah. All right, let's get into Tua. Like Tua Tagovailoa, we're going to talk about him. We'll get into kind of what he is. Obviously, last year banged up again, 11 games, just under 3,000 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I really want to talk about him because I've been seeing a bunch of just different type of just narratives out there about him right now, in terms of just draft guys and also just kind of like, hey, what are the Miami Dolphins going to do? But when you look at overall, 70.2 passing grade, offensive grade is same, 2.6 turnover worthy percentage, wasn't that bad last year. I think he actually turned that down a little bit, but wasn't great. QB 21, just around 17 fantasy points per game. When you're looking at him, he's QB 24, 25 right now. He shifts. So he's outside of the top 24 quarterbacks in terms of what that is. He did just get his contract, right? Last year, obviously. He got that contract extension there, but he's a very high risk, high reward, right? Like he's very high risk, high reward. So on paper, this offense looks amazing. Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle. We don't know what's going on with Tyreek Hill right now. And I think the decline is coming. So he might have one good year left, but that decline is here. Waddle, man, just can't stay healthy, right? I mean, that's my biggest thing with Waddle. I love Waddle. Jalen Waddle was my wide receiver too coming out of college. Like he was one of my guys, but if he can't stay healthy, just like all of these guys, I mean, that's a problem. You gotta have fantasy points at some part, right? I do think that they really kind of upped their offensive line, right? So Patrick Paul slated to replace him there. They drafted Jonas Saviana. James Daniels is there. So they're going to see that. So that's going to be an improvement there. But here's the thing. I'm worried about Tua as a player because of the injuries, but as the dynasty value, I'm not that worried because QB 25, if he stays on the field, it's hard to imagine him not being QB 16 to 20, right? And that might be his floor.
Yeah, he does not look expensive based on
no
points versus price at all. So it's not a value type of argument. It's just you have this lingering piece in terms of, how you think about dynasty. You have this lingering injury history out there where all your dynasty value could evaporate on one or two hits or injuries during a season. That is a little risky, and he's getting knocked in value for that, because if you go and look at his projected points per game, which is about 16.1, it's a whole half a point or more higher than what Jordan Love is, and Jordan Love's being valued all the way up at QB 12 at QB1 prices. So it's definitely not a price for points thing, because you can get a nice discount on Tua. It's just are you willing to accept the risk? In terms of risk management, are you willing to accept the risk that comes with Tua and injuries, and potentially all that value sort of evaporating based on that one hit? And that's something that each dynasty manager has to weigh. I would say that I'm a little panicked on that. If he's on my team and I was trying to figure out a way to manage risk a little bit better, or depending on the construction of my team, this team is, very safe. I need to, figure out a way to take a little bit, or is very risky. I need to figure out a way to take a little bit of risk. Tua might be one of those players that you can kind of offload some of that risk and find maybe a safer, more consistent quarterback there that maybe your dynasty value wouldn't just all evaporate.
Yeah.
But there are probably teams where you get this tremendous value of having Tua as maybe your QB3 on your team, or a very late QB2 selection if you passed on QBs throughout your Superflex draft and you're able to grab him at the end. He'll earn you fantasy points. When he's on the field, he'll get you those fantasy points, and it'll be helpful. It won't be the 20 plus fantasy points per game, but it's significant. It's decent enough to use him in those Superflex leagues. So it's just your level of risk, how you kind of manage that risk, how you optimize that risk for each one of your teams. In some instances, it might make sense. For me, it does make me a little panicked because if I'm going through a startup draft, am I going to draft him? I'm not going to draft him unless I get him for a huge discount, unless it's just so obvious that we've all just passed him too far that I just need to take him. That's when I take him. But am I going to try and reach for him to get a stack, or am I going to try and do some of those things? Probably not. It's sort of a little, I call it little panicked from that perspective, because the price is getting discounted in for that situation, for what's going on with the Dolphins and for the injury history and what could happen with an evaporate. It's priced into there. So it's just, are you willing to accept the risk and take that in your draft, when your trades, in all those situations?
For those of you in a startup too, just to go off of what he talked about in terms of like that range, right? So really the tier is Fields, Tua, Jackson, Sam Darnold, Anthony Richardson. That's the tier that Tua finds himself in. Of those guys, Tua makes the most sense, in my opinion, because when you're looking at it, he's got the contract, he's got the great offense, he has that. So, like, if I'm in a startup and I see those guys in there and I need QB2, Tua is my target because I do think he has a safer floor. Now, I think it's interesting, though, where you look at the QBs, Dak's going as QB 21, Bryce is going to QB 22. I start to get a little nervous if you don't have your QB2 at that point. Like that's the range where I'm getting a little nervous based on the upside and the ceiling of your team when you're trying to build that thing there. But yeah, I mean, you're right with Tua. The one thing I wanted to point out with Tua too, and this is why it's so hot and cold with him. So last season, he was a top 6 fantasy quarterback. Basically, where was it? He was a top 6 fantasy quarterback at a high rate. So I think it was like 4 or 5 games. But he also finished outside the top 18 fantasy quarterbacks in half of his games too. So that's really where it's at, right? So he got held under 240 passing yards in 6 of 11 games. And we're starting to see a lot of that cover 2 stuff that really makes Tyreek Hill just not look very good. Like that's the problem. They just can't get it down the field. So that's going to be the problem there. Like, I think that's the interesting thing. When you look at him, I just look at him as being kind of like that solid QB2. I'm a little nervous, but as far as tiering and going places, like really his value is all across the board. Like when you're looking at here, like here's a deal, which I don't know if it'd be done or not, but Tua and Jordan Addison for CJ Stroud. Like, I don't know if that can be done in normal leagues out there. I don't think Addison moves the needle for me to move off of CJ Stroud for Tua. That's a pretty far teardrop for me. But some other interesting ones here, like Tua, Will Howard and a second. I mean, I would probably take Tua in that range. Like, we don't know what Will Howard is going to be, right? So when you're thinking of like where it is, it's crazy how much the value is just off the board with Tua here. And some people just don't want those type of assets too. I mean, I've gotten to that point where I just like, I don't want this guy. Like, I need to take off of him. So I think that is interesting for me. The most thing I'm worried about is his injuries. I mean, that's really what it is. And we can't sit here and say it, but I mean, he truly is a 1 concussion away from retirement, right? Like, so that's really what you have to lean into. As a player, I think he's solid QB2. Like, I think he's a value as a QB2. All right, let's go to Kyler, because Kyler is another one that I just, Kyler, you and me have had a love-hate relationship as far as a dynasty asset, because he can be good, Jay. Like, when you look at it last year, he had his first full season, played all 17 games, right? So that's what we're always worried about with Kyler. 3,800 yards, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. On the rushing, that's where his ceiling gets rises, 572 yards and 5 touchdowns there. Offensive grade wasn't bad, 82.1. Passing grade 77.9. Okay. Not a ton of turnover where he plays, 2.4 percentage there. And he finishes a QB 11 fantasy points per game, 17.5. Like, you love that. But here's the context with those fantasy points. So here's where it goes. So Murray topped 25 fantasy points 4 times. So, and really the big one was week 18 when it didn't really matter anymore. And the problem is, though, he finished with 12 or fewer fantasy points 5 times. So he's just, again, kind of like Tua in that range. Now, the only difference is he's going to QB 15, which, based on where his dynasty ranking usually is, which before the last couple seasons, I mean, he was a top 5 guy, right? We've talked about him being a top 5 guy with that rushing upside. I am concerned about Kyler Murray for the only reason that I think that if he doesn't make it to the playoffs and they don't compete for a division title, I think that the Cardinals are going to look at him and say, we need to move on, because I think they're looking at a point where this staff realizes that Kyler can't get him there. And that's when we're going to start seeing this. Now, will he start anywhere else? Yeah, I think Kyler Murray is going to start somewhere else. He's 27, so he's going to find a role. I mean, look at some of the starters out there. Aaron Rodgers is still starting. Justin Fields is still starting. Sam Darnold found a home. Daniel Jones might start. God help us all, right? So when we think of all that, Kyler Murray is going to find a home. But are you as nervous as me, or where are you at with him?
I'm probably a little less panicked. I'd say you hit the nail on the head in terms of, like, this could be one of those situations where, from a fantasy perspective, he gets you the points you need on a points per game basis. But in a real life football, if they decide to move on, that's like a warning sign. And you saw that, like, I'm not comparing the two, but you saw that with Justin Fields. Like, that Justin Fields produces fantasy points when he's playing the quarterback position in the NFL.
Yeah.
But if a team isn't doing well, if it isn't succeeding and there's turmoil and he has to move to another team, you saw what could happen from a value perspective in terms of kind of him falling off. So that, I would agree, that's like the major point. But in terms of scoring fantasy points on the football field, I still think Kyler Murray can do a really good job. He's consistently been a buy in my work. I think from a points per game, price, age type of perspective, he still looks like a buy to me. Okay, so in 2020, 2021, on a points per game basis, he was up over 20 fantasy points per game. In 2022 and 2023, his actuals were in the mid 18s points per games, and his expecteds were, high to mid 19s expected points per game. Mm-hmm. Last year, his 2024 points per game was 18.5 actual, and his expected was 17.8. He doesn't put up less than 18 fantasy points per game when he's playing.
No.
And yes, there might have been a yo-yo, and the last game of the season might have weighed things, and it didn't matter for fantasy teams. And you might have this tough feeling in your stomach when you're trying to, pick which fantasy points. But for the most part, this guy puts up pretty good fantasy points per game. So that makes me less nervous if he's a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Okay.
Marry that with weapons, which I think are going to get better here with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. I just think that this situation, hopefully, I'd love to see him put up another 19, 20 plus points per game this season, and then all those worries go away. But if he's not the starting quarterback for the Cardinals next year, that's going to probably be a problem in terms of value. So I understand that's the main point of argument, but in terms of like selecting him and feeling confident about putting points up on the board this year and helping you win, I really do think Kyler Murray is in a good spot to do that. So I'm not quite as panicked as I am for maybe Jordan Love based on value, maybe Tua based on injury. Mm-hmm. I kind of still like the amount of points that Kyler puts up for the price that you can get him at. So not as panicked, but still, like, in the back of your head, if the team moves on in real NFL football, what does that do to his value? I think you still have to weigh that a little bit.
That's the problem. Like, I think that's where I come into it. Like, when you're thinking of like a value perspective, yeah. I mean, dude, this dude's he's going to QB 15, and from a rushing upside, he could be QB 8, 7, 6 weekly, right? If he hits that ceiling, it's that consistency piece for me. And that offense, like, this offense is very predicated on play action under center. And Kyler doesn't do that very well. So, like, that's the other part of, like, I've always watched the last 2 years. Okay, what's going to look like? Now, they brought back Connors. They have Trey Benson there. You're going to think that heavy run, play action stuff. You have to imagine him and Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to do better. I've talked about Marvin Harrison Jr., what they're looking for there. McBride gives them that option. But his inability to get McBride the ball in the red zone, I mean, McBride owners, you guys are pissed too right now over that. Like, when they think of the lack of touchdowns, like, that's a problem, right? And like now, I think it's gonna go back, right? It's not regressing. I think it'll get better, but that's an issue. I think that's one of those things you have to look with Kyler. I don't mind his price. I really don't. And when you look at trades out there for him, it's weird. Like when you're going through kind of what he goes, a lot of package deals, but like some one-off deals that were disgusting. I saw like Kyler for Jared Goff and Daniel Jones. Give me the upside with Kyler. Like I don't want Jared Goff and Daniel Jones on my roster. The one I thought was interesting. And here's who would you rather have, Kyler or JJ? Where are you at with those two?
Kyler right now, but
Yeah.
I can see JJ because of his age and where he's playing. If he really takes off, if he has a good season this year, I think JJ will be priced much higher than Kyler. It's just the risk of not seeing JJ do it yet, and Kyler having done it for a little bit of time. I'll take a little bit of the safety of Kyler there, but I could see JJ being one of the higher priced assets if it really does take off there, especially playing in Minnesota with all the weapons that they have there.
Okay, I think it's interesting. I think, and I'm crazy. I'm a crazy man when it comes to this, but I think I lean JJ. I think that I think you can get plus though. Like it's just hard when you're just going off a cube trade cut, which you shouldn't only be doing. They're basically back to back, but if you can get a plus side on the JJ based on the tier, throw him in there, right? I'm okay with that based on the age, 22 as opposed to almost 28. I mean, Kyler would be pretty close to 28. He'll turn 28 in that range.
The age is the real big kicker there.
And the buy-in.
A bunch.
Right.
Yeah.
If JJ hits this year, they're buying into him. Like they're going to build it. They have Justin Jefferson. They have Jordan Addison. You look at that team, you're excited about it. So I just think that's interesting. For me, like I said, I'm more worried from an NFL perspective. Like, okay, where is he going to be? What team is he going to be on? Now, he might find a team. Maybe he finds a team with his old buddy, Cliff Kingsbury, when he gets a head coaching job. Like maybe that's how they lean. Like that could happen from a dynasty perspective in that range. All right, let's go to running backs. Breece Hall. Let's talk about Breece because I think he's an interesting dynasty asset right now. Running back 10, Jay. Like that's where he's at currently in terms of value. Last year, obviously had a down year in a bad offense, right? So when we're thinking of what he did last year, it was not the greatest offense in the world, but I mean, it is what it is. So when you're looking at what he did last year, 876 yards, 5 touchdowns, did have 57 catches though for 483 yards and 3 touchdowns. Finished at running back 16, 15.1 fantasy points per game, but offensive grade 62.0, run grade 68.7, only 36 missed tackles for. So we've seen him go down a lot. Context in terms of where he's at, though, the Jets had the fewest rushing attempts in the league last year and were somehow dead last in goal line carries for a second season in a row. When I wrote that up in my article, I could not believe when I found that stat. That's crazy to me. But Hall still posted a top 10 snap share, was top 5 in receiving yards per game among running backs, and he led all running backs in targets. So that's the positive side here. Now, let's go negative context this year. Then we'll get into Jay. Justin Fields is there. Not so much of a check down guy. Not so much of a he's going to scramble, so he's going to take away some of that stuff. Braylon Allen's there. Isaiah Davis. Aaron Glenn's talked about balance, having those type of things there. But it's hard for me to imagine that like you have Breece Hall, one of the more explosive guys in the league, that you can't be like, oh, I'm just going to give Isaiah Davis the ball. Like as much as Isaiah Davis truthers are out there, hard for me to do that there. So I don't know. Last year, he also ranked 4th in yards per contact per attempt, highest inside the 5 carry share. So like there's things there. Like he had that for his career. And he's only 23. So we're not talking about an old dude here, Jay. But where are you leaning with Breece? How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, I'm a little panicked, but I'd say that I think we all just have to finally accept that he's not in the Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs tier. And that's where he sort of traded the last 2 years until when Gibbs came in. There was questions about whether Gibbs should be in that tier or not. It was Bijan and Breece and maybe Gibbs. Now it's Bijan and Gibbs, and then Breece is in a different ball game, different tier, and he's sort of being priced like that as well. So his prices have come down quite a bit because I think we've just kind of recognized that he's not the elite level like Bijan. It's a little bit different, and that's not to say he's not capable of getting up there. But right now, if you look at projections for 2025, ESPN has him at 13.7 points per game, which is completely different than what Bijan is, which is at 19.6, or Gibbs is at 18.7. It's just totally two different things. And you know what? One thing that I've noticed is if you're out there drafting ADP at Bijan or Breece at 10, that's pretty far down there, and it kind of feels like you're getting a value for somebody that's still young, that could produce fairly well. It's just you can't expect the 19, 20 points per game range. That's not what Breece Hall is. That's not what it should be. And if we all can collectively kind of decide that he's not in that tier, he's in a different tier than that tier, then it feels like it's not like incredibly terrible. Now, in terms of setup and situation, you talked about the new head coach, Aaron Glenn. You got a new quarterback with Justin Fields. Justin Fields takes a lot of rushing attack. He does run the ball, so he'll be involved in that NFL. And I would say Braylon Allen is not a slouch. They seem to like keep drafting running backs in there behind Breece as well. So I think Braylon Allen's pretty good as well. So it's not a perfect situation. I'd say I'm a little panicked. I always worried about those players that reach heights of the top of their position, either 1, 2, 3, something like that. Reach heights as one of the most expensive assets in all of Dynasty, and then they start falling. And you just worry if that snowball keeps falling, the momentum keeps falling, people get panicked and they start selling for prices that they maybe shouldn't, and it just keeps driving the price further and further down. That sort of snowball effect, it can happen. There's lots of players that it's happened to over time. And it just like, it's greed and panic. You just kind of push it the wrong one way too hard, and then it corrects and it goes the other way too hard. That's what I worry about with Breece. If he really does only put up 13.7 and he's not in the 15 range or something like that, you just worry that sort of that value kind of evaporates where, you thought of him as the highest class of the running back position. Now it's not that, and there's sort of this tarnish to it that keeps going down. So that's kind of my worry. I'm a little panicked. I would say that I'm the guy that's in there scooping up value. So if he falls in your draft, I'd be interested in picking him. If you're willing to give him to me at a discount, I'd be interested in him because he's still young. And he's got that, that he's, has put up some decent numbers in terms of from a points per game perspective. But if it's really going to be that 13.7 points per game, that's when you kind of start to get worried that maybe more of that value would sort of evaporate from RB10 to, into the RB2 range. And that's where you get worried.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I get all the points that you have there. I'm probably least worried about Breece than most people, probably you too, in terms of this list. I think he can get back in. Now, is he in the Gibbs and Bijan? No, but I think he can get back in top 5. I wrote about it. I said he could get back into the top 5, maybe that 3 to 8 range, right? Or whatever you want to say there. Like if he's in that 3, 4, 5 category, I think he can be there. Obviously, the rookies, it just depends on the rookies. If Judkins pops off, Travion Henderson pops off, Amarian pops off there. Like, I get it. But when you're looking at kind of running back 3, I mean, Genti's obviously, he's going to probably stay in there. But Barkley, 4 or 5, when you're looking at in terms of Devonta Chain, Amarian Hampton's already at 6. Should Amarian Hampton be at running back 6 with Najee Harris being there and everything there? Like, those are the questions you have to ask yourself. I'm buying Breece. Like, and again, for context and just for actionable, takeaways, a 26 first in Breece, I will take Breece. I don't usually buy running backs with first, but he's the type of talent at his age, which I'm still okay with drafting or trading for, because when spoiler alert, I know we've talked about the 26 class. Not a huge fan of the running backs right now in terms of what they are. If I can get Breece right now, and if he is averaging that, and whatever that contract, if it comes or if it doesn't, he's going to find another home, right? Najee Harris just got the money with the Chargers. Like, Breece Hall's going to find it. I'm okay with that. Some deals out there. 26 firsts are definitely out there. Some other ones. Breece Hall for Michael Penix Jr. straight up. I think it's interesting because Michael Penix Jr. is probably your QB 3 or 4. And if you need that running back help and you can kind of move off of him, you can. I like this deal. Breece Hall for Trey Benson, Jack Beck, and a 26 second. I'll take Breece. I'll take the upside there of a top 5 guy. Like, if you can get those type of deals done, those package deals for that's a deal that's tough to do in a league. But I do think a 26 first. There was also Breece Hall for Tank Dell a 26 first. So literally a 26 first. I don't think Tank's anything at this point. I'm okay with that. I think that if you can get solid running back too, but like Jay said, you have to go in with if you don't think you go in the top 5, that's fine, but you have to pay those prices anyway. You're paying running back 2 prices. I'll take running back 2 prices with some ceiling play. Like, I'm okay with that there. Anything last on Breece before we move on?
No, that makes sense. like I said, if you're getting value on him, I don't mind taking the upside. I just hope that the projected points per game is wrong. I hope that ESPN and Mike Clay is a little bit low, and he moves up into the 15, 16 points per game range, because that's where I feel a lot more comfortable, if that's right.
I can't wait to clip this shit, send it to Mike Clay because he follows me, and be like, "Hey, Mike, Jay said Stein said he can't wait till you're wrong." That's what he says here. That's what we're gonna do.
Well, I'm just cheering for the player, man. Just cheering for the player.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, Mike Clay's a great guy. If you guys do the projections, go follow him, but also follow it there because he gives it to everybody for free. Like, he's an amazing guy there. All right, I think we might actually disagree on this one. James Cook, running back for the Bills last year. We answered the question, what happens if he scores more than 2 rushing touchdowns, right? Yeah, 19. 19 touchdowns last year, 1,200 yards after contact, 842, 26 explosive runs, 10 plus yards or more. Loose rated one is great, 54.3. But receiving wise, had 2 touchdowns, had 32 catches. Offensive grade, 86.2, 88.6 run grade. Missed tackles for us, was sitting there at 47. Finished his running back 8 in points per game, 16.7 points per game there. Really kind of a tale of two, I guess, the season in terms of what you would expect from him. Like, he had enough to where he could be a top 10 running back, but did struggle down the stretch. Also, red zone, Josh Allen gets the red zone carries. So there is also that still. Like, even though we did see James Cook score a lot of touchdowns, it's the red zone carries that's the problem, like, in terms of what you're looking for in terms of that range there. And I don't know what happened 19. It's 18 total touchdowns. I'm sorry. 18 total touchdowns, 16 rushing, receiving hit too. I did the math wrong there, but he did have finally touchdowns there. So that's the question I have. So when you think of James Cook and what he is, what do we expect from him? Are you worried about James Cook? What's your takeaway, Jay?
A little worried. Okay. I'm just looking at the rankings right now. Would you rather have James Cook or Kenneth Walker?
That's a tough one though, because I'm
RB16, RB17.
I'm a Kenneth Walker guy, right?
Yeah.
And like I probably still would lean Kenneth Walker, but it's close. But it's Kenneth Walker.
Yeah. Okay. So actual points per game way outperforms expected points per game in 2024. So when I see those big discrepancies, like, I expect like some sort of reversion to kind of what it expected. It was a total of 3.6 points total points per game. So he way outperformed on actual versus expected. That to me seems like you're going to have some sort of reversion at some point. So that's kind of how I think about it. But does it revert to the actual expected or somewhere in between? I'm not sure. Right now he's projected at 15.7. But what if the 15 points? What if it's actually like 13.5 or something like that? It's 2 points less than that because there's some sort of reversion. That's where I get worried. In there is like he just like way outperformed what was expected. He's in a very similar offense, very similar setup there with Josh Allen and the Bills, and does that kind of revert back to or come in a little bit lower than what everybody's sort of thinking that he's going to do. So this is one of those situations where I don't have as much confidence, or that I feel like the projected points per game might be biased a little bit towards the upside for him, and he might come in a little bit lower than that. And so that's where I think about. Now, it's not like you have a crazy value that you have to pay for him. RB16 is much lower than he was going for a year ago or 2 years ago. So like his value has come down. My question is how confident are we in that 15.7 points per game, or is it going to be something a little bit lower than that? That's where my worry is. There's other guys that I like in that range that I think have valuation upside, like Kenneth Walker, that is RB17 on Keep Trade Cut, and James Cook RB16, where I think Kenneth Walker does have a points per game upside, maybe, or value type of upside versus what James Cook has. So that's my concern. If you look at points per game versus price versus age and all those things added together, I'd rather have some other guys. I think there might be points per game pressure that it might not work out to be the 15.7, but it's anybody's guess how these things work out. Some people might have more insight into that than I do, but as far as I can see, if you're betting the reversion to the mean, if you're betting it reverts back to closer to expected, maybe there's a drop Maybe it's not the 15.7. Maybe it's something less than that, because in 2024 his expected points per game were 13.1. In 2023 is 13.3. Those are where his expected is. So if his actual is 15 and 15.7 and it comes in at 13.3, people are not going to be happy about where they drafted him at that price.
Yeah, no, 100%. I get that. I think at running back 15 though, not a bad bet. And again, the contract thing is real too. So like that's the other concern, right? Like, is he going to get a contract extension? What does that look like? I have a hard time believing he doesn't. Look at this. Look at his depth chart behind him. Ty Johnson, Ray Davis fans. You guys got to stop. Like, Ray Davis fans are incredibly just annoying. Darian, Evans is still there, I think. Or no, he left. And then Frank Gore. Like when you're looking at that, Junior, like, what are we doing here? James Cook is their guy. He's going to get that deal probably done. I think that if you're looking at it where he can, if you draft him as running back 15, I think he can get back those prices at running back 15. I think you'd be okay with that. Now, is he an amazing asset? No, I don't think he's an amazing asset, but he might be just one of those Joe Mixon type assets the last couple of years where it's just like, oh yeah, he plugs in 15 points per game. Hey, I'll take it. And I think that's where the prices are right now. There are some deals, a couple deals, 2 wide receivers, and you're a wide receiver head. So, well, off the top, I'm not giving up. I don't think Jay is either. Are you giving up a 26 first for James Cook? I'm not.
No.
Okay. So there's a tier. Breece is where I probably would lean for running backs. Like I'm okay doing that for a 26 first, but James Cook, I'm not. There are a lot of 26 first deals out here. I would not recommend doing that. But James Cook for Jordan Addison, where you at?
Jordan Addison, probably.
Okay. What about James Cook for Jameson Williams? That's a fun one.
Oh, pick somebody else.
Well, this is the fun one because when you look at a Jameson, I think there's some question marks about Jameson because I mean, new coaching staff, how are they going to utilize him? He did good last year, but he, when you're thinking of streaky, I mean, Jameson Williams is streaky when you're thinking of what he is. Amon-Ra being there, Laporta, you have Gibbs, you have Montgomery, all those guys. So James Cook sitting here with who?
I'd probably take Cook.
It's interesting, right? Like that's an interesting one. I saw that deal straight up. So those are the 2 wide receivers that went straight up for James Cook. I would rather do the Jameson Williams deal than Jordan Addison deal, which is weird because Jordan Addison, behind Justin Jefferson, JJ, all of those things. I just think realistically, Addison has a higher ceiling than Jameson Williams in Dynasty right now. Yeah. So that's interesting. As far as Cook goes, yeah. No, go ahead.
Who are you taking are you taking Quinshon Judkins or are you taking Cook?
Quinshon.
Are you taking Josh Jacobs or are you taking Cook?
That's the fun one. So that's the interesting one because that happened too, but you had to add a second to the Cook side. So someone traded James Cook in a second for Josh Jacobs.
Are you taking Christian McCaffrey or James Cook?
Christian McCaffrey. If I'm on a win now team, I will take the 1 year of Christian McCaffrey over James Cook.
So if you look at ADP, Josh Jacobs 52, James Cook 53. It's funny that you have to add a second to get there.
Well, this on this deal. I don't know. Like, definitely there was a second there, which is weird because I think I'd rather have James Cook straight up. Wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. It's age, I guess.
Yeah, get your ageism out of here. Fantasy points wins games, Jay, not the birthday. Not the birthday. So, yeah, there is that. I think, to me, I'd rather have James Cook over Josh Jacobs straight up. That's just how I look at it. All right, let's go on one more running back. We'll talk about an old guy again. We got to throw on Joe Mixon in here. We're going to talk about him. Nick Chubb just signed with the Texans, so we do want to mention that. When you think of Joe Mixon, we're looking at him last year. We had a good year. So overall, when we're thinking of him, over 1,000 yards, the 13 touchdowns. I think the most important thing, played in 14 games. So like that's good for Mixon because I think that's the concern always with the older running backs. Hey, are they going to be able to stand up? He was definitely a very solid, reliable, high-end running back too. Right now, he's going at running back 24. Offensive grade last year of PFF, 76.6, 78.9 run grade, 45 missed tackles forced, average about, in that range, 17 fantasy points per game when he's out there. So he's a mid running back too, in that range, kind of a high end guy. Could be running back 1 and sometimes when you think of where he finished there. Where are you leading at Joe Mixon? Are you worried about Chubb coming in there, kind of taking some value away from him? Where are you at with him? Chubb's interesting. I mean, he was a great player before the injuries, but he's really, he's coming off some major season-ending injuries.
Yeah, I'm worried about Chubb if Chubb is healthy because Chubb's one of my favorite players, and I think he produces fantasy points at an exceptional level. And I think last year we didn't. Christian mentioned this in the Discord. Last year we didn't see a very healthy Chubb, and I think they rushed him back, and he got re-injured. And so Nick Chubb wasn't the Nick Chubb that we've come to know over the last few years. Kind of like a liken to like a Derrick Henry. Nick Chubb produces exceptional fantasy points, and if he's healthy and he's on the field, that's an issue. And now he might have, done something from an injury perspective that makes him different than he was before. But I am concerned that if Nick Chubb is very, very healthy and he's playing, that he's going to eat into Joe Mixon's work. And I do think we should think about that.
Okay.
The historic. Okay, so last year, towards the end of the year, Joe Mixon was putting up exceptional fantasy points on the Texans, and his price had skyrocketed. It went up really high for his age. And so I said, okay, we got to sell. This is a perfect opportunity to sell Joe Mixon. So I had to sell on him in my work since the end of the last year. And now you get the Nick Chubb news, and you get one more age, and everybody's considering, can I move off of Joe Mixon into something younger, something like that, because we're getting closer and closer to the age cliff. It's not for running backs; it's a little earlier, but he's almost 29 years old now. He does produce pretty good fantasy points, so you have to weigh that with, I don't want to give him away for nothing, because he does help you win championships. It's just how long can you hold on to that asset, and can you get something that's worth it back from those situations? It's sort of a debate about whether you want to win now or you're rebuilding and you're trying to build some sort of dynasty in the future. For me on Mixon, what kind of value can you get on him? But I am worried about Nick Chubb healthy Nick Chubb eating into his share. And in my work, actually, I'm getting very, very close to moving him from a sell to a hold at this point. So, whereas last year I would have said I'm very, very panicked based on his price. Now I'm getting to the point where his price is kind of getting to a reasonable range for how much you have to pay for the points that he puts up. Mm-hmm. But it's still like you worry about that next leg. Is Nick Chubb going to push that points per game down even further because he's eating further and further into it? Because a healthy Nick Chubb is very dangerous on the football field. And if he's out there, he's going to be eaten into Nick Chubb's carries. But if he's not, then you get that traditional Joe Mixon type of points per game, and you feel happy about it.
Yeah.
But you get one more year closer to maybe that falling off the cliff, and less likely being able to move him. And so that's kind of, you just kind of have to weigh that over time. So getting closer to hold, less panic than I was a year ago because his price has come down quite a bit. If you're in a win down mode, you probably want to have him if you can get him on your team for a discount. You're just not overpaying for it. If you're trying to, rebuild or find space, this is a guy that, as we go through the season, if he puts up points, you probably can get a decent trade back for him, especially if he's scoring points now. That'll help you significantly from a dynasty perspective. But his value doesn't go up unless he's scoring points on the field. He's not going up because of his situation anymore.
No,
the situation is getting older, and you have Nick Chubb adding in. So the only way that you get his points is not in the spring. It's not during summer workouts. It's not during August camp or September or August camp. It's when you're actually playing the games and scoring points. If he has spike weeks, that's when you can move him.
So I think the most thing I'm concerned with Nick Chubb, I don't know. I guess I'm a Nick Chubb hater because we were talking about in the Discord, and they were all, because Christian just loves Nick Chubb. So it's a whole thing. But last year, you think of Nick Chubb and what he is when you're thinking of that, 3.3 yards per carry. He did not have one single 20-plus yard run last year. I mean, he was not explosive last year. Now, if they rushed him back,
injuries.
Yeah, like if they rushed him back, they had the stuff. I get it, the injuries and all that kind of stuff. But that matters though. Like there's something there, and I get he has another year. But we have seen running backs get injured like that and just fall off the map. Like we've seen this too. So that's context. The one thing that makes me a little bit more concerned with Houston is, first of all, they have a new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, hasn't called plays in the NFL. So that's one thing. We don't really know what Mixon's role is going to be. Right? Should have a lead role. He's going to run heavy stuff. So based on what you've seen from Caley before, what they've talked about in the offseason, it does seem like he's going to be heavy, run heavy there. But they've added a ton in the wide receiver room, right? We saw Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Christian Kirk. What if they're more pass friendly there? And, when you're looking at the offensive line, God, the Texans offensive line is a patchwork, right? They lost Tunzel. They brought in Cam Robinson, but he has a really bad, his run grade last year, 55.7. That's a little nerve-wracking. So, like, offensive line play is probably my biggest concern with Mixon, plus the new offensive play caller. And what Jay's talking about in terms of maybe rebuilding, what I would say is retooling, maybe trying to find an asset out there that you could flip for a better running back later, right? So, like, there are a lot of deals where you can get a second for him, like just a second. If you feel like at some point you can move that second for a running back mid-level, a veteran guy, that maybe gives you a little bit more upside, a little bit more burn on the age meter, right? If he's at almost 29 years old, if you can get a 27-year-old for a second later, maybe you do that, right? So if you're thinking from like a dynasty value, or just kind of like a flip, kind of, okay, how do I flip this guy? He's also going for a lot of like veteran wide receivers, like Chris Godwin's going out there. Like, so that's, again, coming off injury. Like, there's some question marks in terms of what Joe's going for in that range. But if you could maybe flip them, get a better asset that you can kind of off ramp him, do those type of things. I think that's part of it. Am I panicked about him as a player? No, because I think we know what he is, like Jay talked about. But what I am worried about is the context around him. Offensive line. Oh my God. The Texans offensive line. It's not great, right? Play calling. We don't know what it looks like. Stroud built around him. Really want to win now. Like, I think that if Mixon can still stay on the field, he's going to be a running back too. It's not going to be super efficient, but he'll be out there. But if I can pivot now, I think I might. I think that's the one guy of this group that I'm like, hey, if I can pivot now for a second, I would do that. All right, let's get to wide receivers. DK Metcalf. Let's talk about him. So DK, he's got his new quarterback. Jay's excited about Aaron Rodgers coming back to the NFL. He's there, ready to roll. He's on the Steelers now. So obviously last year, when you're looking at the numbers, it's all different now as far as you will. I will say this for DK, was not great last year from a points per game perspective. 12.6 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 35, three drops, receiving grade 75.0, offensive grade 74.3. Right now, he's wide receiver 26. That's the lowest I've seen DK Metcalf probably in Dynasty his entire career, since it's obviously his rookie year there. How are we feeling? Do we have any hope for DK this year?
I have very little hope for the Steelers this year. Besides maybe my crush in Caleb Johnson, maybe he turns out to be something, but maybe that's not. But I am not excited to watch the Steelers this season. I'm just looking. You got DK Metcalf, Robert Woods, Calvin Austin as
But
your
that's the
starting
argument
wide
for
receivers.
DK, right? Like, that's the argument.
Maybe Roman Wilson works himself in there, and then you have
so.
Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback, with some guys that maybe thought they were starting up until Aaron Rodgers there with Will Howard and maybe Mason Rudolph there. This just does not inspire any type of thing. And if I was teams, I would like double cover DK because there's nobody else here to really do anything. So that's how I kind of look at it, is just this. This is a bad situation, the Steelers. If for fantasy perspective, I'm trying to avoid this as best I can. I think of all of these assets, you hope DK is the one that kind of works the best, and you don't have to pay too much for him. Like you said, his price is lower than he has been at time, but he's in a whole completely new situation. This is arguably a really bad situation. This is probably one of the worst situations you can be in for a wide receiver. So, I think there is something to say about, if you have a decent wide receiver, it's nice to have, or a good wide receiver from a fantasy perspective, it's nice to have another complement to your game because it takes attention away. And if there's not that complement, then everybody sort of focuses down on you, and then you can't score as many points as you'd think, or you might project in that situation. And so I think that might be the case. The other thing I'd point out is we love DK Metcalf. He's done really well. I've had an affinity to him as well. But in general, he has never been that 18 plus points per game guy. He's never been that elite guy. There's been years where he's in, from an actual perspective, where I think he got up to like 17 points per game. But over the last 4 years, he's in the 13 to 15, maybe a little less points per game type of range. And that's the type of wide receiver getting. And that was maybe in a better situation. Now maybe he commands more of the share, but the offense is just not that great. So we'll see how this all plays out. But this is not necessarily I really dislike DK and I think he's terrible or anything like that. This situation is really bad. I'm worried about how this setup goes. Historically, he hasn't been like a crazy high points per game guy. He's been a 13 to 15 points per game. Like, does it end up in the 15 range or does it end up in the 13 range? I'm not exactly sure right now. All the projections put the points going to him because it's hard to put the points to anybody else. But in those situations, you worry, does the defense key in and focus up on him, and then maybe it doesn't maybe equate to exactly what you think it should at those ranges.
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned, right? Like 41-year-old quarterback Aaron Rodgers, Arthur Smith. I mean, those are the biggest red flags in the world, Jay. Like if you're dating somebody and those are the two things they bring to the table right away, like you're concerned a little bit. I think here's the thing. The one thing that you could buy into with Metcalf is that, the target share is going to be there. Like that's the thing. Like he's going to get targets there. I think his fantasy ceiling, though, it hinges on what he does in red zone and how big plays he has, right? And, Metcalf has struggled. He's had some drops. The big plays haven't really been there. He's 27. Like, I do think that it's an interesting. I probably have him as a hold overall. Like, if I'm just talking in general, like, because I think if I have him, I'm not going to get the deals I want. But if I can get a first back, this might be the time I move off of DK Metcalf, right? But I'm not okay with like a Ricky Pearsall in a second or something like that. Like, those are not the deals that I'm comfortable moving off DK for. So I'm okay holding him because if he does have those big games, we see the target share. I mean, I do think you can get some people to buy into him a little bit. It's just, I just struggle with what Aaron Rodgers is at this point, right? Because, DK loves and Rodgers, they both love timing-based routes and vertical speed and digs and slants, go balls. Like those are the things that fit Metcalf. But is Arthur Smith going to call that crap? Like that's the thing to get in your head when you're thinking of like DK Metcalf as a wide receiver. So to me, he's a hold. So it's just kind of like, I'm concerned though. Like he's fallen down. Like he's at wide receiver 26. Like you could see him definitely fall down a little bit, even more. And that's concerning. I will say this, the guy I'm more concerned about, the next guy we're going to talk about, DJ Moore from Chicago. He has not had a good offseason. Like it has not been good for DJ Moore. Obviously they drafted Loveland. They drafted Luther Burden. He's 28. He has not had the greatest like offseason interviews that you've seen out there. He's wide receiver 31 in Keep Trade Cut right now. Last year, when you're thinking of it, had a ton of targets. When I was going through this, 137 targets. He was not efficient though. 98 catches, whatever, 966 yards, 6 touchdowns was not great for the targets that you get. Now those targets are definitely going down, right? Under Ben Johnson and what he's going to do. He's a boomer bust wide receiver too. Like just boom bust out there. I guarantee it just looks like that contract's going to be movable after this next year. I could see basically writing on the wall here, but so can everybody else in your dynasty league. So that's the problem. Like everybody else sees that and notice like, hey, the trends of DJ Moore, how comfortable are you maybe trading for him? And that's why you maybe get stuck with him. Is that kind of where we're at, Jay, with him?
Yeah, I think if you don't want to trade him at a discount because I think he, like you mentioned the target share that he had last year and his ability to, command a decent chunk of an offense that like gives you sort of this potential upside. And, for the same reason DK Metcalf has this potential upside, DJ Moore would have some of that upside as well. But the problem is the weapons here. You got a new head coach and he's drafting Colston Loveland, the tight end, and Luther Burden in the second round. First 2 rounds, those seem like his guys. Yeah. And I'm not to say that DJ Moore isn't the guy this year, and he probably will be. But even last year, you draft Rome Odunze in the first round. There's a lot of weapons you have to share all that love around with everybody.
Yep.
And, this makes them a better NFL team, probably. But when you're thinking about how to spread around the fantasy points, it's hard to see DJ Moore's target share going up from that perspective. So just from a fundamental perspective, you think of share coming down a little bit. So points per game, especially if I guess you just have to increase efficiency if you want to keep the same points per game with a lower target share. And so that's what you need to see from DJ Moore. And we talked about his off season and everything like that. But, he scores points and you can get him fairly cheaply. So I'm not necessarily like completely out of him, but am I where I thought he was maybe 2 or 3 years ago? Have I wavered a little bit from there? Yes. It's a little bit of a different situation. Now he's 28 years old. Like you got a contract situation or contract, however that shapes up. And you're maybe getting less share and you got new guys coming in. It's like it's a different feel than where he was a couple years ago for the Chicago Bears. And so that's what I'd say. Just sort of that situation is changing. I don't think he's a bad player, but I think that, he's not getting the 18 points per game. He's not getting you the 20 points per game. It's different than it was a few years ago. And so I'm worried about there might be downside in terms of expectations from him. And when there's downside, versus where consensus is or where expectation is, then you start to see people start to, get a awkward taste in their mouth, or, it starts to, his prices start to get pushed down a little bit when you kind of underperform consensus or underperform expectations. And that's what I'm a little bit worried about with DJ Moore. But he's been one of those guys that I pounded the table on. And so I don't think he's necessarily a bad player. I just think that, where the situation is, maybe you are a little bit panicked now.
Look at you. Yeah, all the spreadsheet guys love DJ Moore. Like all the spreadsheet guys, they've loved DJ Moore for a long time. Here's some deals I'd be okay doing. So DJ Moore in a third for Terry McLaurin. I think at this point in their careers, I'd rather have Terry McLaurin. I'd rather have Scary Terry, and I don't mind dropping a third. Am I crazy there?
Well, Terry's almost 30.
Yeah, I know.
You'll be careful with that age there.
But he's better. Like he's a better
Probably.
player. So,
Maybe.
and I mean, we've just seen the DJ Moore experience so much, right? Like we've seen and not just DJ Moore, like we've seen a player, he gets an okay, slanty spot. He's a wide receiver too. He's a darling. Oh my gosh. Now we know this kid can play. Oh, he's going to find another home. Deontay Johnson ring a bell to you? Like, does Deontay, like that's part of it too, right? Like we've seen this before to where I can get proven production in Terry McLaurin this year and probably next year with Jaden Daniels, who's a top 3 dynasty quarterback. I'll do that deal, right? Like I think that's okay. I do think he still holds name value though, like where you could probably go get some guys. I think there are some guys like Jay that still like DJ Moore a lot. So there's opportunity for you out there, some managers to kind of move and pivot there. But I'm kind of out on DJ. Like if I can get any type of value back, I'm probably him and Metcalf on the most panicked about, right? When we think of what we're trying to like talk about here. But I do think that Metcalf is an interesting hole just because of where like not a lot of people have liked Metcalf anyway. A lot of people have liked DJ Moore. So there's still that in their value minds, right? When we're thinking of dynasty minds and how people think, there's still that narrative in that range too with DJ Moore, and that's in that side. All right, last guy here, and then we'll wrap this up. Dalton Kincaid, Jay, for the Bills, tight end 10 on Keep Trade Cut right now. Last year, 500 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did not have a great year overall. Tight end 26, 7.8 fantasy points per game, 71.5 offensive grade, receiving grade 71.1. The reason why I'm on here, though, I mean, he's still tight end 10, right? Like he's still getting drafted in that ADP range. He's getting drafted ahead of David Njoku, Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, Mason Taylor, Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, Terrence Ferguson, Jake Ferguson. Man, I mean, it's hard to justify maybe his ADP right now when you're thinking of it. He did have a good rookie year, but he is 25. He came in the year pretty old. I mean, he's going to turn 26 this next year too. But some numbers out there from Pat Fitzmaurice, who I love so much. But when you're looking at what it slipped to, 34 yards per game last year. Catch rate fell to 50% from 80%. Targets fell as well, and everybody just tied him to Josh Allen, and they really haven't added to that room either. Like, I mean, overall, like Kincaid still can be the 2-3 option, right? But I'm panicked. If I could pivot off of Dalton Kincaid, I don't want him on any of my rosters. Where are you at with Kincaid?
Agreed. This one's a value one for me too. Projecting 8.6 points per game, which gets him into like the tight end 18 to 20 range from a points per game perspective. But then you have to pay tight end 10 prices if you want to draft him or buy him. That to me screams like get out. And so, definitely pivot off of him. I love getting younger to the extent that you can get into like a Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren. It might take a little bit extra to get there, but those are the type of the guys that, Colston Loveland's 21 years old now. Dalton Kincaid's almost 26 or, 25 going on into 26. So, you pay a little bit extra, get into sort of the younger, maybe that holds their value and hopefully, you might get similar points per game or expected points per game for this season, but eventually Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren kind of take over, at their respective positions, or at least maybe they still have hope, where I think the players that are trading Dalton Kincaid at tight end 10 prices, that's the only reason you're in there is hope. You got Josh Allen throwing you the ball. You hope that he takes some significant share there. and we just haven't seen it yet. And so you hope that there's some sort of fundamental like shift there where Josh Allen just starts to get comfortable with him and starts putting more in there, but that you haven't seen that quite yet. So if it happens, great. Then yeah, sure, he's probably a buy. But if it continues status quo as is, in the similar situation where he gets 8.5 fantasy points per game, then you're probably overpaying for him at tight end 10 prices.
Well, I have a deal because when you were talking about it, popped up. Matthew Golden and Dalton Kincaid for Tyler Warren. That's what you're giving up. You give up a late first.
You have to go first.
Yeah. Where is that? I mean, but when you're looking at it, and this might be blasphemous to say out there on Dynasty Twitter or Dynasty because you guys get all mad all the time, I would rather have Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid as an asset. I just would. I don't care what anybody says. I know he's behind him. I know he's ranked behind him. I know all the narrative. I would rather have Kyle Pitts. So if I could trade Dalton Kincaid for Kyle Pitts plus something, I would do that. And I'm okay with that because they're in the same tier to me. And I like Kyle Pitts there. And when you look at the depth chart, that's the thing. They use Dawson Knox too much in 12 personnel. That hurts them getting on the field when you're looking at blocking and with what they tried to do last year with James Cook. If they continue to do that, that's an issue. Khalil Shakir kind of popped off a little bit last year. Josh Palmer's there. Elijah Moore is there. There's there. And what if Keon Coleman takes that next step, right? And then now we're looking at even a smaller target share out there for Dalton Kincaid. So I think he's still going way too high at tight end 10. I would continue to drop him down. All those guys I listed at the beginning, I might take them before him, right? And so if I can get anybody in that tier plus of something, I would do that.
Yeah, right. All those guys Njoku's perfect. Here's a guy that's significantly cheaper than Dalton Kincaid, but scores a difference maker amount of points more than Kincaid on a yearly basis. That's important. That's important. Would you rather have Dalton Kincaid and 2.05 or Colston Loveland?
Colston Loveland.
Yeah. Okay.
You just do that because, 22-ish. I think he's 22. All right. He's young. And you just take the value there. A guy that got just drafted in the first round and is with Ben Johnson and what he did with Laporta. Yep. That's the other thing too. What have the Bills done with Kincaid? They just really haven't put him in a system for success. And that's something also to look at. It's time to pivot, I'm panicking out, pivot off of them and just kind of go up. So if you could tier up, great. I'm totally okay with tearing down too. For Kincaid, he's not really anybody I'm interested in having a dynasty roster.
Dalton Kincaid was a first-round pick too, right? So that's probably what we were thinking about back then. Was he first round?
I was not. I was not thinking about Dalton Kincaid as being anything.
Oh, you're not.
I was not a Dalton Kincaid guy.
Yeah, there you go. That's why.
I was not. We when we were at our previous company, we argued about that a ton. And me and Christian were on the other end of that. We were not that type of guy. Yeah, he was a 25th pick, but even then. Yeah. He was also not a pick to Ben Johnson, those type of things too, when you're thinking of it there. Yeah. All right. That's the show. We talked a little panic out here for some dynasty assets. Hope you stuck with us. Let us know what you think. Obviously, if you're on the podcast, leave us a review. If you're on YouTube, drop it drop some trades below. What do you got for us? Where are you at with these guys? I know the dynasty season is long. And this is kind of the hard 2 months here as we go into it and start talking about kind of value and where these guys are at. You're starting to build your rosters up, but we're here to help. Go check out our Substack. Articles go up there almost daily. Go check out our Patreon. Go check out all that stuff there. Next week, we've got a fun one for you, another mock, but we're going 2027 mock. We're getting to the fun class, just a 2027 straight up mock. Who are these talented guys that we're talking about, and all the fun for you guys in terms of your Devy leagues, your Campus Can't leagues, or also just your Dynasty leagues. What do those 27 picks look like? We'll talk a little bit about value as well. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys next week.